The Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. With your hosts, Joe Bond.
You're awful.
And AJ Applegarth.
It's Sin Shu Chu. It's a mouthful.
All right. Welcome to the Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. My name is Joe Bond, founder of FantasySixPack.net. I am unfortunately having a solo it this week. No co-host in AJ. His daughter's sick, so he's taking care of the family, so understandable there. Before we jump into things, just want to remind everybody to hit that subscribe button, that like button, give us those reviews on wherever you watch and listen. We appreciate your support. Just because I don't feel like talking about myself, we're going to jump right in and bring in our guest of honor. It's Pat Fitzmaurice. Wow, that was butchered. Sorry. That was just totally on accident. That was just me slurring my words. What's going on, Pat?
Hey, Joe. Great to join you, man. Sorry I don't get to chop it up with AJ too, but family comes first. And
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, man. Just a crazy time of year. I think this is my third podcast in the last 2 days. But like I was saying on Twitter recently and retweeting the link to the show, I'm kind of most excited about this one because not only am I allowed to drink, but you actually kind of encouraged me to drink. So
hell yeah. It's a Fantasy Six-Pack Hour. I mean,
I'm a Wisconsin boy. You don't have to ask me to drink beer. So
good stuff.
Really great to be on with you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. For those of you who do not know Pat, he is with the football girl doing the ranks over there. He was the number 1 in-season most accurate ranker on Fantasy Pros last year. I believe number 8 for draft. You've been top 5, top 10 pretty much every year, it feels like. So you are always up there. Great mind when it comes to the rankings. So we are happy to have you on tonight to talk some rankings.
Thanks, man.
Before we jump into that, though, let's do our beer of the week.
Beer.
Since you are the guest of honor, what you got?
I'm drinking a Stone IPA.
Hey, those are good. I like
it. Kind of a little on the generic side. I wasn't quite prepared for this, or I would have, brought the fastball. But this is a nice go-to. This and Lagunitas are probably my fallbacks for just solid IPAs.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple, when I don't pay for the expensive stuff, I go to, there's a Heavy Seas brewery by me that I usually have as, one of my secondary beers for the show if I get that far, which I more than often do than I probably shouldn't. But, and Stone's one of them, too. I like their stuff a lot. And, who's the other one? They do the Voodoo Ranger, New Belgium. They do them too. So they're kind of on the cheaper side, but they're good IPAs at the same time. You can get 12 packs for $20 instead of 4 packs for $20.
Right. Exactly.
you gotta mix it in or the wife gets real mad. So anyway, I am drinking an Other Half. It's a brewery out of New York that actually opened up one just here in DC. They got some cool can art. This one's called It's All at the Mall. So it's all a bunch of different shops and restaurants at the mall, which is pretty cool down here in DC. This is a 8%er Imperial Pale Ale. I gave it a 4 on Untapped. It's pretty solid. I've had this one in the fridge for a few weeks. I bought a bunch of these when I visited over the summer and just been waiting to open them during the show. So cheers.
Nice.
All right, so before we get started into the rankings, we've got some news, not breaking news, but just some news to talk about here. And the injury of the year, of the offseason so far, is Travis Etienne. There was always talk who's going to get the work there. Was it James Robinson? Was it Etienne? And there was even Carlos Hyde being mixed in here too. So now that Etienne is gone, how far up the ranks has James Robinson jumped for you?
So I've got him, I think, running back 15, and basically he's just below that first really that first tier of guys I think are round 1 and 2 worthy.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of ends with, I think, Clyde Edwards-Helaire at running back 14. So Robinson's just below that, and I think he finished running back 7 last year as far as half-point PPR. So, we don't know quite what this offense is going to look like. I mean, he was a true workhorse last year. Now we know Urban Meyer's got his old guy, Carlos Hyde from Ohio State. And we've got maybe Laviska Shenault taking away, maybe they line up Viska in the backfield a little bit, give him some of the short area stuff. So we can't speculate on Robinson being a top 10 guy for this year, but I don't mind him mid to late third round. I mean, there are probably receivers I'm taking ahead of him there, and there's definitely a tier break, and he's on this other side of a tier break. But yeah, I mean, now I think people who were drafting him before and kind of speculating that he might still have a decent role, really made out. And it's going to be really interesting to see where he goes in this weekend's drafts. Such a big weekend for drafts coming up.
It is.
And, I think people are going to be pretty aggressive with him now.
Yeah, I've been doing tons of best balls. Obviously, we've all done Scott Fish. Most of us have that have been on the show at least. I've been in under industry drafts early on where I've interchanged Robinson and Etienne. I felt like a lot. In best ball, I was kind of grabbing Etienne a little higher than I had him ranked, just because I thought maybe the upside was there for him. He'd had these monster games. You never knew. Robinson felt like a safer play, so I would grab him maybe a little later. I did happen to get James Robinson, I found out, in Scott Fish, so yeah, that's a big win there. But James Robinson might be a league winner again as Scott Fish 2 years in a row. How crazy is that going to be? But yeah, this is a big one. And obviously, it moves him way up. I put him as running back 18 in half PPR. I've got him behind, the Chris Carsons and Dobbins and stuff like that. But he's right in that territory. That's kind of where I feel like he fits. And you could interchange pretty much all of those guys. It is kind of the fear of what is the offense going to look like with Trevor Lawrence. It hasn't looked pretty preseason, but right. And Urban Meyer's come out and said multiple times. He's like, I'm learning a lot. That's not a good sign when your head coach is like, I'm learning on the job and I've got a rookie quarterback learning on the job at the same time. This offense might actually be uglier than last year, sadly enough, it looks like. So time will tell, but it's not looking good so far.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that Trevor Lawrence is going to sort of lift all boats in that offense. I mean, just a guy who has come in and pretty much lived up to the hype. Coming out of high school and basically doing everything that people could have ever asked of him at Clemson. I'm fairly optimistic that they've given him enough to work with there that maybe he's going to elevate the other guys in that offense. So I'm still trying to be optimistic, but like you said, I mean, the early signs have not been super encouraging.
I've just been under siege every single snap. It's like, oh man, they just didn't do enough with that offensive line early enough, and that's almost the worst situation to throw a rookie quarterback in, is where they have zero offensive line. Even though he is mobile, he's like hike. Oh, there's a guy in my face. A half second later, there's nothing he can do. So we'll see. I have all the faith in the world for Trevor Lawrence. I think he's a fantastic player, but I just don't know how much he can do with what is around him right now. So moving on here, we do have a trade that went down this week, and it was Sony Michel to the Rams, blowing up all those Darrell Henderson owners who were just hyping it up after Akers went down. And this was always kind of in the back of everybody's minds. I felt like they were going to go out and get somebody else. I mean, let's be real. We were all sort of trying to jump on that Xavier Jones bandwagon and, I don't know, Funk maybe a little bit, but that wasn't really going to work. If Henderson went down, they were in super big trouble. And Henderson is known to be injury prone. He's dealing with a thumb injury right now. They don't quite know how serious it is, but it sounds like he'll be okay. But I mean, what does this do to Darrell Henderson moving forward for you?
Yeah, that's a good question, Joe. I mean, I've kind of wrestled with this one for the last, half day, and just trying to figure out like where I want to put these guys, whether, I'm looking to maybe draft any of these guys. Like, I don't want to knock Henderson down that far because I don't think they are going to bring in Sony Michel 2.5 weeks before the start of the season. A guy with, kind of chronic knee issues. And like, I don't think they're going to expect 200 carries out of him this season. I could be wrong. I mean, I know there's some people who think like he's going to be the main guy. Adam Schefter was kind of suggesting that, but it was kind of hard to tell whether that was based on a source or just kind of speculation on his part. But we do know that I think Henderson is probably going to have the meteor role in the passing game. And, that's where you can make a lot of hay in fantasy as a running back. Maybe Sony gets more of the goal line work, although Henderson, has shown to be kind of a hard-nosed guy for a guy who, not like the sturdiest physical builds, I guess, but like he was a pretty decent inside runner, I thought, last year. So it's going to be interesting. I dropped him a little bit. I've got him below that tier you mentioned with Chris Carson and Dobbins or whatever, and he was already below there for me. Now with this trade, I've got Damian Harris ahead of him. So I think I've got him like 23rd now. And like Sony was the tougher guy to place for me. I mean, I've got him like, boy, I want to say I've got him in the mid 30s now.
Oh yeah, you do. I just noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like around right where I have like Melvin Gordon.
Yep.
A guy who's going to have a role, not totally clear what sort of role, probably isn't going to be the main guy, but is still going to have possible standalone value there.
Yeah, I had trouble doing it too. So it's funny. I moved Darrell Henderson down just slightly more than you. I put him below Mike Davis even. But
everyone likes Mike Davis more than me, I think. So that's understandable.
But I didn't move Sony Michel up that high because I don't know. I'm not a Sony Michel believer, truther. Like I don't think he's actually that good. And he has a tough time staying healthy. So
sure.
I just, this Rams offense could be really good and open things up for him, and he can really thrive. But, maybe we'll hear some news as camp goes on, as he's, getting used to the offense, and maybe we'll see him in a preseason game just because they're going to need to get him work with his offense. And maybe that'll change my mind, and I'll move him up a little bit. But, yeah, mid-30s, it's a little tough. There's just a bunch of guys in that tier that I could believe in a little more than him. Even like a Jamal Williams and James Conner, you could sort of believe in around the same range. That's like the lower 30s for me. So, it's hard. It's really, this is a tough one because it's very unknown territory with a new running back, a week before, 2 weeks before the season starts. So, it's really hard to say how it's going to shake out until we actually see it. So,
yeah. What did you do with Damian Harris after the,
I moved him up just a couple of spots. I don't really think it changes things for him a whole lot. I think Stevenson actually gets the biggest jump here, and I moved him up into like the mid 60s. Harris for me, he's 23 from me, so he's actually just 2 ahead of Henderson. So, it's a New England running back. Did we really trust him? I know. Yeah. I hate to be just that obvious and that boring about it, but it's the truth. Like, it's been hard to trust a New England running back for a long time. So
yeah, I think I've got Harris between Josh Jacobs and Henderson at 22, and I've got Stevenson like in the early to mid 50s now. Like, I'm excited about this for him.
I think I could move him up. I just didn't. I don't know. It's one of the things I quick reaction did it, and then I didn't go back and really look at it harder than I probably should have. before the show, but yeah, that's where he is right now. But now that I'm looking at some of the names in front of him, like Joshua Kelly and Allison and Tariq Cohen and Samaje Perine, yeah, he can move up. He's probably in the lower 50s at least for me if I were to redo it real quick.
Yeah, I was getting him in a lot of dynasty leagues in the third round of rookie drafts this year, and I just felt like he was kind of a and I use this phrase on one of the other pods, like a dollar store Najee Harris, like a big dude who can catch passes and like has pretty nimble feet. Like, I mean, he's never just going to run past people, but like if you watched, I think the Cotton Bowl where Stevenson just completely steamrolled Florida this past year, like that was kind of an exciting performance, and like I just sort of remembered that. And I know my buddy Alex Dunlap of Roster Watch said he had a bad Senior Bowl and just said he didn't think he had any juice, and like Alex was surprised Stevenson even got drafted, but man, he showed out in the preseason so far.
Yes, he has
4 touchdowns in 2 games, and even a little bit of break. I don't want to say breakaway speed, but man, he's popped a couple long runs. So he's definitely intriguing now that Sony's out of the way.
Yeah, he's sort of one of those players, like he shows better in the game than he does like, in workouts. So I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Could well be. Those bigger backs are like that sometimes. They're not going to win any foot races in shorts in camp, but man, like he's tough to bring down.
I got snaked from him in my dynasty draft in round 3 by 1 pick, and I'm getting Elijah Mitchell instead. But I was eyeing him up. I was like, I mean, hey, I'll take him. It's a New England running back. It feels like the backup running back every year is the one you want to own there. So
right, he could be LeGarrette Blount with hands. I mean,
yeah,
if he turns out to be LeGarrette Blount who can catch passes, like that would be a nice find.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, man, we got lots of comments. I was passing up on all of these. Thanks, Jeff, for answering those. That's why we got you here, Jeff. All right, so let's jump into the rankings talk here. And I mean, we've been talking a lot about rankings already, but specifically the questions we had laid out for the show. And just to start off here, you've been one of the top dogs in the rankings contest for years. Explain to folks, don't give away all your secrets, but, what is your process? How are you this good?
Oh, man. So for draft rankings, I always just kind of the process starts like normally wild card weekend. Like I'll just kind of sit down with the regular season fresh in my brain and just kind of like bang out an initial set of rankings for the next year's draft. And, I'll start moving guys around just based on playoff performances sometimes. And, kind of doing it with an awareness of contract status and stuff like that. And, they're just kind of ever changing from that point until now when we get in the heart of draft season, and I like part of it, Joe. I mean, like I'm a good plagiarist, man. Like I read people's work and like people make compelling arguments about players. And when I see smart people are on certain players, like, I can be persuaded like anyone else. And
yeah.
I mean, I've been kind of talked into Ezekiel Elliott, who, when I sat down to do those initial rankings, I had him like running back 11 or something. And I mean, it still does like kind of gnaw at my brain a little bit that the last time we saw Zeke, he just didn't look all that sharp or explosive. And Tony Pollard looked better, but, had Rich Rebar on my podcast saying that like, well, okay, maybe it looked that way because Pollard did have some nice breakaway runs, but Zeke actually had a better success rate on runs than Pollard did last year. So, and just seeing that, a lot of people are kind of nonplussed by the seemingly bad season Zeke had, and granted, just nothing went his way. Injury luck, injuries to his key teammates. So I'm amenable to change based on, some of the arguments made by smart people. And I think part of it with draft rankings is just like avoiding landmines. Like to me, that's almost better than picking the right players. It's just knowing which guys you don't want to bet on, which guys you're out on. I don't know that I've got a ton of those guys this year, but I've got a few. and like that's kind of it, fading those guys, pushing them down the boards. Yeah, so for draft rankings, that's it. We could get into the in-season stuff.
Oh yeah,
and how I think people play defenses too much, like factor in defenses over volume and talent, maybe more than they should. But that's kind of it. Yeah, the process stuff. We could talk about over beers for hours, but I think it might put some of the viewers to sleep.
No, I hear you, but it's good to know, like, we're sort of similar, although you're way more successful at it than I am. I kind of stink at the draft rankings, at least the last couple of years. I was like, I don't know, like 30 something 2 years ago. This past year was not good. I don't even want to know what my number was.
You're really good at the in-season stuff.
I've been good at the in-season stuff, but I just my secret with the in-season is like constant tweaking. Like, you have to react to news like that, and I'm with you on the fact that people over-evaluate the defensive matchups too much. Like, sometimes like when you get those like stellar cornerback matchups, maybe you can knock the receiver down a little bit, but you don't you don't need to go crazy. And you don't play them at DFS. Like, that's the thing. But like, you still got to rank them high. They're still going to perform. They're just not going to perform at their ceiling. But yeah, the draft rankings, I seem to. I'm missing something ever so slightly, and I can't quite figure it out yet. But I'm kind of similar to you, where like I just constantly, read news, read beat writers' information, listen to people, and adjust from there. And yeah, I'm the same way with Zeke too. It's like I keep bumping him up, and I just picked him today in a best ball league, number 5, and I was like, that's horrible. But I was like, he's there. That's where he is in my ranking, so I had to do it.
Yo, I mean, 5 is an uncomfortable spot this year.
I don't like it. When I got it, I was so mad.
Yeah, man. I mean, normally the 5th isn't bad. Like, there are a couple of options there, and you can maybe let the people picking 2, 3, and 4 kind of take some decisions out of your hands. But 5 is a rough spot in drafts.
I don't like it. I really don't. So,
yeah. Hey, can I mention one more process?
Sure.
Go real quick. Just like generally, I think people tend to be too situation reliant. Like, people get way too hung up on the too many mouths to feed thing. Like, and if a dude
Dallas
is talented,
is one.
Man, like, I'm betting on Jerry Jeudy, man. I don't care if Cortland Sutton and Noah Fant are there. I don't care that the quarterbacking is not going to be, even league average in Denver. Like, Judy's great. He's going to pop.
Talent's going to win.
What's that?
Talent's going to win.
Yeah. I kind of feel like that. So I'm not burying guys based on situation. And, that's kind of like, I was definitely above consensus on Etienne because I felt like, he was getting pushed down just because people were scared. He wasn't going to have a clean lead role there. Mm-hmm. But like, he was exactly the sort of talent like we should be craving, man. This guy who was just a great college prospect who produced from the get-go at Clemson, had this college skill set, caught passes, great in the open field. And people were just kind of scared of the situation, and I was drafting him pretty aggressively, but, I guess that one's not going to work out this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was a big ETN believer myself. But yeah, I feel you on the, don't let the too many mouths to feed. Like, maybe if it's like a tiebreaker between, like, you're flipping a coin between 2 receivers that you pretty much have tied. Okay, fine. Like, if he's going to lose 15 targets because he's got 3 other receivers that they can throw to, sure, then maybe that's what you do. But for the most part, again, talent wins out in my opinion. So just draft a better guy. Just draft a better player. So next question I've got for you here is are there any players that you're surprised about, on how you ranked them based on your research? I mean, you kind of already mentioned like Zeke, like you kept moving him up your board. So people like him who you kind of surprised yourself as to where you ended up ranking them based off your research.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of who would fall into that category. Sorry, I'm just looking at my rankings to see if a name pops out like that. I guess Will Fuller would kind of be one. I wasn't crazy about the situation initially with, knowing he was going to serve a suspension. a team changer. Going to a team with a quarterback who hasn't necessarily established himself yet, and then that team goes out and drafts another vertical threat with a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to have Will Fuller buried in my rankings, but like the more I looked at it, I'm like, this guy kind of proved last year that he is just not strictly a 9 route guy. Like he's actually got a pretty broad base of skills as a receiver, and he kind of showed that last year, granted with a really good quarterback in Deshaun Watson. But he wound up a little bit higher than I thought he was going to be for me. I think I had him as low as the 40s at one point, but now I've got him up to like wide receiver 36. You're really not sure who else falls in it. Ryan Tannehill, I'm always kind of surprised when I see him in the top 10, but
yeah, he's boring, it feels like, but he's so efficient.
But so efficient, and then they add Julio Jones.
Absolutely.
And they have a new coordinator, so maybe they're not quite as run heavy. But on the other hand, I don't exactly want Ryan Tannehill running the run and shoot. I like that efficiency. I like that so much of that offense has been predicated on play action and, getting Tannehill out of the pocket and letting him use his legs. That offense has really worked well for him, and I hope they don't get too far away from the stuff that Arthur Smith was doing. But yeah, man, with his running ability, you just need that as a quarterback to fire these days. The Matt Ryan guy who just doesn't run and throws for 4,400 yards, and those guys just aren't that valuable anymore. That's just baseline value at best. But Tannehill, with his running ability and that efficiency, man, and now, give him another explosive wide receiver.
Yeah, when you upgrade from, Corey Davis is all right, I get it. He had a good season. He's looking good in preseason, but you upgrade from Corey Davis to Julio Jones.
Right.
Yeah, that's gonna make a difference. I'll tell you a guy that has surprised me on my list, and it was in an article of mine I wrote for the site. Michael Gallup. I had him buried at one point in the rankings just because he was so bad last season, and then I started doing some more research into him. I realized he was pretty good when Dak was healthy last year. He was 13th in air yards. His ADOT was 16 and a half. He's going to be third on that team in targets, but this is a team that's going to be really bad still, defensively, and they're going to have to pass a lot. And so Gallup's going to still see a fair number of targets. So again, this is one of those things that you brought up earlier where it's don't be afraid of the guys who, there's not enough balls, there's not enough balls to go around for everybody, but Gallup's going to be a solid guy. He's in my mid-30s right now, so for receivers.
I'm kind of with you there. He's mid to late 30s for me too. And if anything happens to either Cooper or Lamb, there's a guy who would, exactly. I mean, he would be a coveted top 15, top 20 guy every week. So
easily.
Yeah, I like him too. I was doing a draft where I actually got Dak, didn't get the chance to stack with Lamb or Cooper, and then kind of made it a point to go out and get Gallup in the middle rounds.
Yeah, and it's funny. I don't know how many. It feels like Gallup's not really being talked about, and hopefully he still won't be because all my favorite drafts are coming up. All the leagues that I care about more than any of them are coming up soon. So guys, I hope you're not listening. Yeah. So hopefully I can snag some Gallup on the cheap. So. Last question before we jump into some players, some individual players here is, outside of injuries, who are some guys that are moving up, and then give me a couple of guys that are moving down your rankings.
Yeah. So, moving up, I mean, we just touched on Damian Harris. I don't know how much the Ramondre Stevenson role is going to evolve in these early weeks, but now I think it's pretty clear that Damian Harris is going to have a big role, but not only that, but the sense in New England that this quarterback spot is maybe moving towards, which is boy, man, like I think that's going to be really good for all the New England skill players. Like
Yeah.
the passing game is going to be more functional, and Cam is not going to get all those rushing touchdowns. So like suddenly Damian Harris does have like 10 touchdown upside. You
Does
know,
Mac Jones
if
pull a Tom Brady and just do the 1 yard sneak 10 times a
yeah,
year?
man,
That always pissed me off.
yeah, I know that was always frustrating if you had whichever New England back. But I feel like that is going to help, Jacoby Myers, another guy who's been really rising up for me. Like, Jacoby Myers, what was it, 2019 in the preseason where he just kind of exploded out of nowhere and got our attention, and then just really hasn't had a chance to shine, or didn't last year with the passing game just completely dysfunctional. And, now he's showing some exciting things again. Like he's been on the rise for sure. So some of the New England guys, I mean, I've just kind of been avoiding that offense for a couple of years. And now I'm like really interested in some of those dudes. Who's been moving down? I mean, Curtis Samuel not playing at all in Washington. That was a guy I wanted to like. And, now like De'Ami Brown is kind of showing out, and Logan Thomas looks really good again. It just seems like Curtis Samuel might have trouble finding his place in that offense, and maybe those short area targets are still going to J.D. McKissick. He's one for sure, and a guy who I've actually gone from being above consensus on Fantasy Pros to like below consensus. Kenny Galladay, like,
Yeah.
man, I mean, I think he's a terrific player, one of the best contested catch artists in the game. I mean, I wasn't worried about him playing with Daniel Jones because he actually made David Blau look like an NFL caliber quarterback a couple of years ago in Detroit when they played like 5 games together. And Galladay was like a top 10 receiver in those games with a guy who shouldn't even be in the NFL playing quarterback. And but a hamstring injury that has basically kept him out of his first camp with a new team. Like, I'm always wary of the team moving wide receivers to begin with, and then he loses his whole training camp to an injury. So, man, I got some Galladay and best balls, the ones I was drafting back in February and March, but I've not been drafting him very often lately, man. As much as I like the guy, I just feel like things are off to a really bad start for him in 2021.
I'm the same way on Galladay. I was huge on him, and that same article actually I wrote about his, like, the fact that his air yards, are incredible, and like you don't need to worry about that with, in New York, because actually Jones throws a good deep ball, and so that actually could be a really good fit. But yeah, the injuries and him not really practicing at all have really soured me. Jamar Chase is the guy who I've sort of moved down just a couple of slots, but it sounds like he's starting to figure things out again in camp, so maybe I'll throw him back up there. But he dropped a couple of ranks in my wide receiver rankings because of all the drops, and you don't like to see a guy who has not played football in an entire year, by the way, then come in and struggle with catching the ball. That's not good news. So you need him to figure that out sooner rather than later before I can trust him. Plus, rookie receivers, we saw it last year with Judy. Everybody loved Jerry Judy, and he had the drops. So it just went through my mind, and I'm like, oh no, here we go again. The top receiver, this is going to happen. So that was just a guy that I had in my mind. And another situation that sort of kind of keeps bouncing, it feels like, is the Jets backfield, right? Is Tevin Coleman and Michael Carter. Like, they seem to be kind of going back and forth with like whoever's having the better week. So I want to keep an eye. I think Michael Carter is going to ultimately win this out, but it may take longer than we thought, it seems like. So that's just something to keep an eye out for too.
I'm worried about that one, man. I mean, he was running with the third team behind Ty Johnson in that preseason game against the Packers last weekend. Like, Michael Carter really didn't make it into that game until late third quarter or something, after Tevin and Ty had been out there. Like, that was pretty alarming for me. I don't know if they're going to make this a committee right off or if Michael Carter is going to have any place in it in the early weeks. Like, he's going to show up eventually, but man,
Right.
like, he might be one of those guys you're struggling to keep on your roster in the early rounds or in the early weeks when the injuries start to hit.
Yep.
Yeah,
no, exactly. That's why I've been like, I liked him landing in New York, but then when you hear about this happening, that was the exact thought I had was, he's going to be a hard player to keep on your team because he's going to get like 3 carries a week for the first like 2 or 3 weeks. And you're like, well, what am I doing with this guy?
Right.
And then all of a sudden he's going to blow up after like week 8.
Right.
Everybody's going to go, okay, found a league winner off the waivers. So
sure, man. I mean, there were people dropping Jonathan Taylor last year early.
People dropping Cam Akers last year. I mean, it
3
happened.
carries.
So yeah, it happens all the time. So, all right, well, let's jump into some players that you like more than the consensus. And what we mean by the consensus, everybody, is the Fantasy Pros Expert Consensus Rankings, that ECR column that you see on all the rankings that you see on Fantasy Six Pack. You see them on the Fantasy Girl with Pat's rankings. That column, ECR, that's what that means. So this is the consensus of all 190 rankers at this point. It's something crazy. They've blown it up. So it's a lot of guys. We all know what we're doing here. So first guy right off the bat, and the early on guys, like the smaller the number is big still because they're so high up there. And you love some Gibson, man. It feels like. Tell me why.
It does. And it's funny, Joe. I mean, talk about a guy we had this huge misconception of what he was going to be as a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we had a guy who had 30 some carries in college.
Yeah, I had no idea what to expect.
Yeah, so he comes in, but like, he's got this passing game expertise. He's a converted wide receiver and all. Like, so everyone figures he's going to maybe work his way slowly into the offense in the passing game role, and eventually build up that role in the running game while Washington was giving carries to Adrian Peterson and Peyton Barber early in the season. And instead, by the end of the season, we were bemoaning how J.D. McKissick had the passing down role, and Gibson was just merely the workhorse runner for that team. Like, that couldn't have been any more unpredictable last year. So we saw him thrive in that role as a runner. We know he's got passing game chops. He just doesn't have the gig right now because McKissick happens to be pretty decent in that role too. I think eventually, you like to think they're going to know that the ball is always you're always going to get more out of having the ball in Antonio Gibson's hands than in J.D. McKissick's hands. So hopefully we see that passing game start to shift a little more. McKissick's going to have his role, but maybe we see Gibson getting more targets. And the funny thing is, Joe, like, I don't know if people realize he is just as big and as fast as Jonathan Taylor, who is like the prototypical prospect for running back. Like, the ideal size and speed is Jonathan Taylor, but Gibson pretty much has almost identical dimensions. They built a really nice offensive line there. I think there's going to be more touchdown upside with a competent quarterback there. I'm just really excited about him, and happy to get him anywhere in the back half of the first round.
There seems to be a lot of talk recently about Gibson. I've got him in like the mid-second round still. I can't quite buy into it fully, just because you do worry that that like the snap share and just the touches in general there, like for him, like it just doesn't feel like it's there for some of those guys above him. I mean, you're talking about guys like Eckler who are going to see they're going to catch 80 passes, right, if they're healthy all year. I don't know if Gibson's got that upside. That's where I think he loses, even in half PPR. I think that's where he loses the value behind guys like that. Chubb, we know, is a monster, even though he's going to lose touches as a Hunt. He's proven he's better than Hunt, and he saw it last year at the end of the year. Like, he's just going to crush. Gibson's super efficient with the touches he gets, though, and that's what helps. But can he be that efficient again? We'll see. So, I like him, but I'm not fully buying in to like end of the first round yet, but I don't know. I might be convinced if I read some more news. Like you said,
so you have Chubb ahead of Gibson.
I do.
Okay, which is like I think if you probably did that that feature on Fantasy Pros where you can see how experts have you compare two guys and see like which percentage of experts. I think the majority would have Chubb over Gibson, probably a clear majority. But yeah, for me, I guess that one, like I see more potential for growth in Gibson's role than I guess I see for Chubb's. Like I think Hunt is always going to be kind of an obstacle to Chubb in the passing game. And I don't know that, Cleveland really wants to feature him in the passing game. It's just kind of not his thing. Maybe the best pure runner in the league.
Yeah, he hasn't needed it though. That's the thing. It's like he hasn't needed it. So like, I'll take what we can get from him.
Yeah, like I just see more potential role versatility for Gibson. Like they could pump up his role in the passing game, whereas I think Hunt's or Chubb is always going to have a little bit of a ceiling in that area.
I do agree with that, and they were those were hard. Like Chubb's hard to rank for me, because of that. Like I do have him a little higher than some, but even some of the pass catchers, but just that pure rushing ability, like that he's just proven it time and time again. Like that just it's like almost like Derrick Henry light in some degree. Like he's just proven it, so like I'm just gonna run with it still at this point. So the next guy here, we're going to go to receiver here, and, not quite the jump, but Chris Godwin, you've got him a little bit higher than the consensus than others. I know people some people are a little worried, the amount of weapons there and the fact that Tom Brady really likes to spread the ball around is really going to limit his upside. But you've got him ranked 4 higher in the overall rankings than everybody else. Why are you higher on him than others?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a caveat with this one, Joe, because he's 13 for me, and I do think there is a clear wide receiver 1 tier, 1 through 12, and then a pretty sharp drop off after that to the next group. So, Godwin is kind of the headliner of that next tier for me, but I guess this gets back to what we were talking about earlier, where I tend to look at the talent and not necessarily the just the too many mouths to feed, because it is kind of a frightening situation when you look at that with Evans and Antonio Brown and Gronk and like even the Buccaneers, like 4th and 5th receivers like Scotty Miller and Tyler Johnson. Those guys are good,
capable.
So
yeah.
But Godwin is really good, man. This guy has just been like pretty phenomenal the last couple of years, and it's a bet on the talent. I think we saw Evans kind of need to rely on touchdowns last year to get over because he lost some target volume. And I kind of think that, targets are an earned thing, and like Godwin has still been making out pretty okay with the targets, and I think it's going to continue to be that way. I just think this dude's a pretty special player, and if he was in a different situation, I could see myself having him as like a top 5 or 6 guy.
Absolutely.
But and like I'm already, that's kind of it. I feel like I'm already handicapping him with the ranking of 13 because he's in this offense. Like on talent alone, I think he's like a top 10 dude.
Yeah, no, I agree, and we saw it just a couple of years ago where he was just phenomenal. Injuries I think held him back a bit last year as well. But with Brady really figuring out that offense at the end of the season there, and we saw how it just exploded. I think Godwin's in for a big season if he can stay healthy, despite everybody else being there. The next guy here, another receiver we're going to stick with is DJ Moore. You like him a bit more than the consensus, and even more so than the ADP.
Yeah, so his touchdown luck has got to turn around, right? This guy
hope so.
Putting up 1,000-yard seasons right off the bat. And it was kind of weird the way they used him and Robbie Anderson last year in this offense, it was almost kind of hard to figure out. Like right off the bat, they were using Robbie, who had always been kind of the 9-route guy, the deep threat for the Jets. They were using Robbie as sort of the short area possession guy and like having DJ Moore run those routes. And it was like, then their roles kind of didn't shift, but they sort of, I don't know, evolved over the course of the season, I guess you could say. And DJ Moore became a little more of a do-everything guy. And I just think he is going to clearly emerge as the wide receiver one there. Like another dude who's just so good at getting open. And, yes, there's target competition with Robbie, and Terrace Marshall looks really good too. Although they don't have a tight end, which kind of helps. But then again, Christian McCaffrey is there too. He's going to get some targets. And by the way, Joe, everyone is too low on Sam Darnold. I mean, like either we've got these pass catchers ranked way too high or Sam Darnold way too low.
But do we though? I mean, Bridgewater wasn't a good quarterback last year for fantasy, yet all of his like Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel to some degree were all pretty good. So like I think sometimes the receivers can be good because especially in PPR, right? They're getting the yards. They're just not getting the touchdowns.
Yeah.
But receivers can still thrive without touchdowns because they get so much work. Bridgewater wasn't getting his touchdowns, and that didn't matter. Like you get a 400-yard passing game and 0 touchdowns, and your day kind of stinks as the quarterback.
That was kind of it, that Robbie and DJ, hit as far as catches and yardage, but were considered major touchdown disappointments. So, like, if Sam Darnold gets kind of a the breaks on touchdowns that Bridgewater didn't get last year.
Yeah.
But Darnold's kind of an interesting guy because it's a nature versus nurture argument. Like, how much did Gase hurt him? And he goes from like the worst possible coaching situation to maybe the best with Matt Rule and Joe Brady. Like it's just such a better situation for the guy who was, a super high draft pick going at the top of the draft and a guy who was considered to have a lot of potential. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I know we got off the subject on Moore, but
we're good.
So I've got Moore in that wide receiver 2 tier. Just really confident that he is, he's been a prolific producer at a very young age. Very young. I forget exactly how old DJ Moore is right now, but like
24.
Yeah. So 2,000 yards seasons under his belt already, age 24.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Like I think we're going to continue to see his career just ascend to an even higher level.
And you think about it, he had almost 1,200 yards last year on 66 receptions. I mean, that's only gonna get better. It feels like so. I agree with you, and you would hope that Darnold with that coaching staff, getting away from Gase can kind of push things downfield a little bit more for DJ Moore and be, I don't know, maybe more efficient. But I think that's the only thing kind of holding people back from believing in DJ Moore is Sam Darnold, because we just still don't know. We're all just hoping it was Adam Gase holding him back, which was probably the case. But
we're just out of curiosity, Joe, where do you have Moore ranked?
Oh, I think it's similar. I have him 16. I have him just behind Robert Woods, I believe. I'm looking at your. I have him up. I think we're flip-flopped on that. I just love the Robert Woods situation with Stafford, and I've been tempted to keep moving him up. I've been tempted to throw him above both Evans and Godwin as well. I've been a big Bobby Woods fan forever. Bobby Trees fan forever, and I feel like Stafford's finally going to unlock his true potential.
And hell, Joe, they even get him involved in the running game, and they might get him involved in the running game this year,
And they're going to have to even more because even though they traded for Michelle, I feel like there's going to be more like Robert Woods, end arounds. So yeah, I've been like just not doing it, like no, don't do it. But I have a feeling before these get locked in, I'm gonna do it. It's just gonna happen. So, Another receiver here, and I feel like I was looking through your rankings, and you really like these Bengals receivers a lot. But the first one that came across here was T. Higgins. But just kind of explain your the reason why you like a lot of these, especially the veteran Bengals receivers more so than, I guess you don't like Chase as much as everybody else, but it's close.
Yeah, I mean that's evolved too. Yeah, like I was pretty convinced by Higgins last year. Yes, he tapered off after the Burrow injury, but man, like he was just phenomenal when Burrow was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's hard not to like him. And apparently, there have been these reports that maybe the only thing that the Bengals were displeased with about Higgins' rookie year was that he was not in tip-top physical shape. And I guess apparently some of his coaches got on his case about that. And then he comes into camp this year, I guess, just completely ripped, like took that to heart and, got himself in just peak condition. And now they're, saying he's just continuing to look like an absolute monster. We've seen the troubles with Chase, and I had a dilemma. Like I think when the process started, I did have Chase like a little bit ahead of Higgins, but like with the reports we've gotten from Higgins and Chase in camp, like I had to adjust that, and now Chase is just kind of barely hanging on in my top 30, and and then Boyd, like we've seen Burrow support slot guys like. Boyd had a pretty good season last year. At LSU, we saw Jefferson just go berserk out of the slots in his last year, with what a 1,400-yard season or whatever. So I like a slot guy in a Joe Burrow offense. I mean, and Boyd's proven it to be a really good player. And there's another team with no tight end. And it's going to be, those three getting peppered with targets. So I think there's room for 3 top 30 receivers. I'm not sure. I don't think I had Boyd quite in the top 30, but he's close. So yeah, I've got all those guys like between 23 and 33 or 32.
Higgins is 21. I'm looking at your half PPR, by the way. I do half because I feel like I'd like to split the middle. So I'm looking
Higgins,
at it. You got 21.
29 and Boyd
30.
So they all are top 30 actually.
I've got Boyd and Chase. So I've got Chase a couple down from there, but because I'm just, I don't know. Like I said, like the news on him just recently kind of maybe a little more sour, but I might move him back up. But I agree with you, man. Like the veteran guys, even though Higgins is only second year, like they've proven themselves, and Chase is coming off a year where he hasn't played football, and so
right.
It's gonna. I think it's gonna take some time for him to get there, despite how talented that guy is. So, real 2 last quick ones before we jump into some guys that you like a little less. And as you Brandon Cooks, I'm having a really hard time believing on any of these Houston guys. I don't care. Like it's just so hard for me. Like you got to explain this one to me. You're pretty high on him compared to the rest.
Yeah, I mean, just so like. Brandon Cooks has been like, he's been like, this is going to sound disrespectful, but he's been like this NFL cockroach type wide receiver. Like he can survive in any situation. He's jumped teams all over the place. Like he's just tough, man. He's got the hard shell, like put him with any quarterback, any team. And like Brandon Cooks can give you 1,000-yard season. Boy, that's really going to be challenged this year, but he is an alpha receiver you can get pretty cheap. And, if he has good health and knock wood, the concussion issues don't rear up again, like I think he's going to lead this team in targets. I mean, there's a pretty attractive target upside, and this guy's a good receiver. He has big play speed. He's not just a short area guy. He can get downfield. The efficiency, it probably isn't going to be great because the quality of quarterbacking is going to be pretty terrible if Deshaun Watson doesn't, in fact, play quarterback for the Texans. So, yeah, like having him just outside and I'll be honest, like Joe, I haven't wound up with him in many spots because when I get to that point of the wide receiver rankings, I'm always kind of like, all right, well, what's available at the other positions? Oh, I haven't drafted a tight end yet. I'll get one of those now. Maybe it's Logan Thomas or Irv Smith time. So I haven't gotten too much of Brandon Cooks, but would it really surprise you if he, despite how bad that team is, squeezed out 1,000-yard season? The only thing is, I know the touchdown upside is probably capped at 6 on that team.
That's even what he got last year. That's what's funny.
5 or 6 would be really good for him, but I could see him having 1,000-yard season, right? At least a 900-yard season.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I like Tyrod, Virginia Tech Hokie, but Tyrod just doesn't carry receivers, man. Tyrod, right. Looks at one guy, maybe two, and then goes, run.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I just, that's why I have such a hard time believing that Cooks can get it done. I know he's a talented guy. I just, and he'll make it work. Yeah, maybe 800, 900 yards is what I'm thinking, somewhere in there, 5, 6 touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be okay. I'm sort of just passing on him for maybe if I have to draft a receiver in that range, I'm maybe drafting somebody with a little bit more upside because it's just sort of safe, it feels like at this point.
Yeah.
Last guy here, and I want to talk about tight ends just at least once per side here. Irv Smith. I like him, but you like him way more than I do, and you're the only other person I know that likes him this much. So, wow, number 8.
So I've moved him up lately, Joe, and we know the top 6 are sort of, that's their own group. Everyone's got Kelsey 1,
right?
Everyone's got Waller and Kittle 2, 3, and then everyone's got Pitts, Andrews, Hawkinson in some order in the next 3, and then I feel like Logan Thomas is kind of the bridge guy at 7. And then what do you do with the next guy? Everyone has their guys like Goddard, Higbee, Irv Smith. Some people have Gesicki there. To me, Irv Smith, I think, has the most upside because it's a team that really doesn't have anything as the third receiver. I mean, we saw a report today that Chad Beebe is still leading to be the third receiver, and this is a guy who probably wouldn't make a lot of rosters around the NFL. So, there's some target potential there. We started to see him have some decent games last year. Kyle Rudolph is out of the picture. I know the Tyler Conklin boogeyman has scared some people a little bit, but I really think Irv is the primary pass catching tight end in Minnesota. But it's less about passion for Irv Smith and just sort of lack of enthusiasm for some of the other guys. I mean, Irv and Higbee are probably my favorite guys to take shots on. But let's face it, if you don't get one of the top 6, you're just kind of, holding your nose and crossing your fingers.
Throwing darts blindfolded?
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Even if you don't get the first 2 or 3, you're just kind of let's hope. Because there's a lot. There's even question marks about the guys in between that too. So
sure.
I feel I love I like Irv, and I had some people kind of talking me off of him, oh, Kirk Cousins can't do it, but I'm like, but hasn't he before with tight ends? He likes his tight end. So no, you're wrong. So I've kept him up high, but you're a little bit higher on him than I am, and that's great to see. All right, so finish things off here. Some guys that you like less. And I'm going to lump 2 running backs together because you have them back-to-back on your overall.
Okay.
Chris Carson and David Montgomery. I like Carson, and I'm sort of on Montgomery. But you got to tell me why you are, lower on them than the consensus.
And it's hard to be it's hard to feel like I'm anti-Chris Carson. I've still got him top 20 and probably in the same tier that everyone else has. I guess my reservations about him, One, it looks like Rashard Penny might actually be ready to go. So maybe they do give Penny a little bit more of the load than he's had. Number two, I mean, Carson is just a warrior. But I wish he, sometimes made a little bit better business decisions at times. Like he just a dude who relishes contact and takes punishment. And I feel like it's almost inevitable that he misses games. And, I feel like his pass catching upside is a little bit limited. He's not ever going to be one of those real prolific receivers. So it's not like I hate him or anything. Like I'm probably in the minority in having J.K. Dobbins ahead of him. And I know there's really limited pass catching upside with Dobbins. And he's got Gus Edwards there, who's probably a bigger impediment to him than Rashad Penny will be to Carson. But Dobbins is just good, man. And he's in a rushing offense that works. And after what we saw, is there any question that J.K. Dobbins is just super talented? So
no disagreement with you there. The only thing I mentioned on the we do a division preview show. The only thing I mentioned with him was just can we legit believe that 6 yards of carry is going to happen again? Because Lamar is taking a lot of work. We know Gus Edwards is talented. They gave him a giant contract. Gus Edwards is going to be used a lot, not as much as Dobbins, but that's where my hesitation is. Like when Carson's healthy, I think Carson's going to have more at least a little bit more consistency than Dobbins, and that plays a part in my rankings, maybe more so than it should, but I don't know.
I do think that offense, and by the way, Type Flow should not drop Gallup to claim Jacoby Myers. As much as I like Myers, man, keep Gallup.
No, keep Gallup. I agree. I was going to get to that after we finish this conversation, but no, you're good.
So that Baltimore offense does kind of boost the efficiency of these backs, I think. The linebackers having to honor Lamar is definitely a plus for Dobbins, man. And this is a guy who has some burst. So if those guys are frozen just a minute waiting to see if Lamar's going to keep it or hand it off on those RPOs, man, golden opportunity for JK to explode through those holes.
We saw Ingram do it 2 years ago. He was amazing. Right. So yeah, I feel you. So David Montgomery, a lot of people are still on the hype train of David Montgomery being good, coming off the last half of the season last year, not top 4 good, but why are you a little bit lower on him than others?
Yeah. So I think we know that he's not going to have the same role that he had last year when after Cohen got hurt. The only other guy that they were giving meaningful backfield snaps was Cordero Patterson. They had Ryan Nall, who was basically a special teamer. They didn't want to play. Ryan Nall had 4 carries or something on the season. It was crazy. They just didn't want to play that guy. So it was just totally the Montgomery show, man. That was a throwback to the workhorse days of the 80s and 90s when one guy would get that many snaps. So we're not going to see that again now that Cohen is coming back, although, reportedly pretty slowly. And Damian Williams is there now. So Montgomery's not going to have that huge share of the workload. And, Joe, this Bears offensive line is really bad, man. Yes. And, it doesn't help that Tevin Jenkins – it's one thing they trade up for – their lame duck general manager trades up for Justin Fields. Okay, Bears fans were certainly on board with that. But then, almost irresponsible. And a lot of people loved it that they trade up to take Tevin Jenkins. Again, this is a general manager who's not going to be making these future draft picks that he's trading away. And now Jenkins has a back injury. This offensive line is in really bad shape, man. It's going to be a major problem for this offense. So I think is he still my top 20? I think he is.
He is. He's right behind Carson.
Yeah.
Literally one behind him.
He's definitely.
He's number 20 exactly. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's a dude I'm kind of drafting around this year, no question.
Yeah, I feel like people are. Yeah, I mean, I'm slightly higher on him than you, but not by much. It's just one of those like, I'm not ready to put James Robinson up above him. Maybe I should, but again, there are question marks about that offense too. So there's just that's like the whole question mark tier where I want to get one or two of the guys above all of that, so I don't have to worry about that range.
Sure. Yeah,
that's my big strategy going in. Hopefully. So we talked about this earlier, and you alluded to it. Like, you are lower on Mike Davis than most, and yes, you are. So why don't you like Mike Davis? Considering, I mean, he legit should get almost all of the carries in this Atlanta offense.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, he's going to be I think he's going to be 28 this season. And he's a 28, 28 is like the twilight years for most running backs. And this is a 28-year-old career backup. Granted, he did a hell of a job backing up Christian McCaffrey last year, at least early on. I mean, he was giving us 80 to 85% of what we were getting from McCaffrey until, maybe he started running out of gas a little bit because they were working him pretty hard. Mm-hmm. He is ticketed to get all this work. We think like we're projecting him for all these carries because, boy, I mean, what could we possibly project Quadri Allison for, or Cordero Patterson, or
David Hawkins?
Yeah, and who they just got rid of. So,
oh, did they really? I totally missed that news.
I know, that was news. That was actually news to me when I was on one of these shows earlier, and someone told me they cut Hawkins. I'm like, oh,
wow,
that's news. Right.
All
so
right, never mind. Oh yeah, he's with Tennessee now. How about that?
Yeah, I gotta think they're eventually gonna add someone here. But I'm not basing it on that. I'm basing it on the fact that he's going like in the 5th round, Joe. And we're elevating him based on the projection of what we think is going to happen with the touches. And the 5th round, man, I mean, there are still some really good wideouts left. There's it's probably around where you can get T. Higgins or Deontay Johnson. You might still be able to get a top-tier quarterback there, like Dak or Kyler could potentially fall. You might be able to get one of those firewall tight ends before you have to start fishing around for the Tyler Higbees and the Irv Smiths. You might be able to get like Pitts or Hawkinson or Andrews. I don't want to spend a 5th-round pick on a dude who's, never been good enough to win a starting gig before, and is just kind of being projected for this heavy-duty role. But who knows what the hell the Falcons are actually going to do when the season gets going.
Yeah, I don't know. Davis is one of those guys where, if I had to wait on running back, I've been reaching for just slightly just because of those projections. But it's only in those leagues where I've missed on all the top guys and just been going heavy, maybe tight end receivers and things like that. So I think he's got a lot of upside. I did have him last year in leagues, and he was awesome until he sort of fizzled out. But he doesn't have a lot of tread on his tires, honestly. I mean, he's a 28-year-old who probably has 24-year-old tread. He's not a lot there. So maybe there's something, he can come in a little bit better condition and figure some things out here. So another guy here is Ronald Jones. You're pretty low on him this year, and I get it. I don't want anything to do with almost any of these Tampa running backs, but I think some people are really buying into Ronald Jones being the man last year for the majority of the season, but you don't seem to be believing in that.
Yeah, I would tell people not to draft any Tampa Bay running back with the possible exception of Gio in PPR leagues.
Yes.
I think Gio is going to be Tom Brady's new James White. And in PPR or even half PPR leagues. Yeah, so
that's my take.
And I'm a Wisconsin guy, University of Wisconsin guy. So some love to James White. A
I
good
didn't know he
backer.
went to Wisconsin. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, I think like Ronald Jones has been a train wreck in the passing game. Like I don't think Bruce Arian trusts him much at all. Like I think he's a good runner, but for what that offense wants to do, like I just don't think Ronald Jones is going to be on the field very often. Like if he got like a 40% snap count this year, I would be shocked. Like I think it's going to be sub 40%, and no passing game upside there. And then he's also got to like compete with Fournette for carries.
I mean, just last year, him and Fournette tied in snap share at 47%, 47.8 and 47.4. So yeah, like the snap share is only going to go down for Ronald Jones because one of the biggest reasons why he was on the field, at least in the beginning of the season, was targets for receiving. And then they were like, "No, you suck at this," and they brought in Fournette to get all of that later in the season. They were like, "Yeah, no, you're dropping way too many. Goodbye."
Right. And Fournette, you know, like I know he had that one season in Jacksonville where he got
it's not happening again.
70. But like he's always been like a really inefficient pass catcher. Like he's not good at that facet of the game either, despite that one season. So yeah, it's gonna be Gio in on all the passing downs, and that kind of leaves, you know, Fournette and Rojo for this like, you know, hard to predict fight for those early down carries. Like I just don't want any piece of either of those guys.
Yeah, I've taken 0 of them in best ball. I've taken Gio a whole lot because he's so cheap. And so it makes perfect sense there. Last running back here is Myles Gaskin. You're not a fan of his, it feels like, either. And I don't know. I kind of am. I feel like he's the lead dog there. But, I mean, recent news might be telling us otherwise. And maybe why you're wiser than me. So go ahead.
Well, and you know, I was, Joe. I mean, I liked him. Like I still do. He was really impressive last year. Just like, I don't know, man. Like I was really surprised by how good his contact balance was. I'm like, I when he came into the league, I thought he might be a satellite back, a passing down guy, but like he was actually really effective running the ball last year. But just the fact that they have Salvon Ahmed, who was pretty good at the passing game stuff too, and showed that he could be a decent ball carrier last year. Now they bring in Malcolm Brown,
right? Yeah,
is really kind of a coach's pet because he does everything well. Like he's a good blocker, he can catch a little bit, he can run inside. You know, Brown just seems like one of those guys who endears himself to coaches. And yeah, so I kind of panicked on Gaskin when we saw Malcolm Brown lining up in that first preseason game as the starter and getting a lot of work and looking really good. We expected that to be a committee last year, and it was not a committee with Gaskin. And I think we are going to see a committee this year. It really seems like it's headed in that direction. You know, I'm not totally off the Dolphins running backs because that offense actually looks really good now.
It does.
Yeah, so that might be an offense, a backfield worth speculating in at the right price. I just don't know if Gaskin is at the right price right now.
Yeah, I've got him right outside the RB2 range right now. He's a guy though that, like, you know, when I've missed on guys just like Mike Davis, it's like, you know what, the upside's there if things go right, or you know, and you know it did last year for him, so why not? I figure like that's where it's at with him. It's like, sure, if you want to take like one stud running back and then like 3 or 4 receivers, maybe you can get a Gaskins or a Davis late, you know, that type of thing, and you know that could work out pretty well for you, I feel like.
Yeah, and I took him in a draft. He fell to I think I got him in a draft the week after that first preseason game where he fell to like the 7th or 8th round, and I pounced. You know?
Oh yeah,
I'm not totally. You know, he's definitely not on my do not draft list.
Oh yeah, that's a no-brainer pick there. That's a good value there. All right, last player here. Again, I wanted to get one tight end on each side here.
Sure.
Robert Tonyan. you are not a fan, even with Aaron Rodgers coming back.
Oh, man. So, Joe, I mean, I'm a Packer fan, so I actually am a fan of Etienne.
Okay.
We
but
call
not
him
for
David
fantasy.
Kittle.
Yeah.
No, but he's yeah. The thing is, Joe, I mean, 88% catch rate last year. I think 20% of his catches went for touchdown, and like some crazy, like 16% of his targets went for touchdowns. Yeah, so I mean, regression is definitely going to come knocking for Bob Etienne this year, and you know, they've added Randall Cobb, they've added Amari Rodgers, so I don't know if he's, you know, even though he didn't see a ton of targets. I mean, he was 52 of 59 for catches and targets last year, just crazy. You know, I think he'll have his games or whatever, but I just don't think he's going to be a guy you can start every week.
No.
And rely on anything really. Like, he'll show out, you know, 4 or 5 games, but like the other 10 could be like, you know, 1 for 8 yards. Catch for 8 yards.
I guess the only thing going his way is that we know Aaron Rodgers is all about who he can trust and who he likes. And he seems to really like Robert Etienne. So there's something to be said there about that. So he likes to target him, you know, get him routes to the end zone. You know, again, I don't think these rates are going to happen again, especially with all the weapons they brought in. But I think he'll be fine. But I do have him in the back end of my RB or my tight end 1 territory there. You have him a little bit lower than that. You have him 14. I've got him around, I think, 11 or 12. So you're a little bit lower on him than me. But, yeah, nothing like what we saw last year with all those touchdowns. That's not happening again. So,
but anyway, as we talked about, it gets messy with that tight end here.
But, I mean, at the same time, it's like when you're looking at, you know, you're looking at the Goddards, you're looking at the Fants, you're looking at the Tonyans, you're looking at Jonnu Smiths. You're like, 1 week it's this guy, 1 week it's that guy. Right. Especially in best ball, you're like, all right, this week I'll take this guy, this week I'll take this guy. Like, they're just take your shots and figure it out later. Somebody like Logan Thomas will pop out of nowhere and just go grab him instead.
Right.
So
exactly.
That's what's gonna happen. So it's all good. But all right, man. Well, I have no more questions for you, and we are about an hour and 20, so sorry to keep you a little long, but I feel like it was a great conversation. Hope everybody enjoyed listening. Pat, before we let you go, let everybody know where they can find you on the internet and what you got going on this season.
Yeah, sure, Joe. Thanks for bringing me on for some good conversation and good beer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on my second.
So you can get me on Twitter at Fitz_FF. My weekly podcast is Fitz on Fantasy. That's usually out on Tuesday mornings.
Nice.
And my rankings can be found at thefootballgirl.com. And, you know, I've got rankings, draft rankings, and some other stuff up at Football Guys. So, again, thanks for having me on, Joe. And, you know, have a great season, my man.
Yeah, you too, man. All right. Thanks, Pat, for coming on again. And I think, everybody, we're just going to close it out from there. Let's close it out. Jeff, you ready?